Welcome back to the CyberSoul IO, where we make tech human again. Today, we're not starting in a server room, a SOC, or even in a boardroom. We're starting in a storybook. Because sometimes cybersecurity feels like a modern fairy tale. There's dragons and wolves and the occasional troll under the bridge. Actually, it's not so occasional. There's lots of trolls under the bridge. And luckily, my guest today knows how to tell stories in a way that everyone, from engineers to CEOs, can actually understand. Joining me is Jeffrey Wheatman, Senior VP and Cyber Risk Strategist at Black Kite. Jeffrey, welcome to the cybersoul.io.
Oh my God, it is so exciting to be here. I love you picked a topic that is near and dear to my heart. I love telling stories. I love fairy tales, and I love helping our colleagues be more effective at communicating with their non-technical stakeholders because that's a gap that I've seen in my career.
Yeah, and I think it's a gap that we as technical people will continue to see. And I think some of those non-technical people actually are holding the purse strings a lot, you know? So I think this is a really can be uncomfortable conversation, but very, very valuable. And I hope everyone walks away with a couple of more nuggets of information. All right, let's get started. Jeffrey, you've been called a strategist, thought leader in cybersecurity, but I want to start in Once Upon a Time land. Is cybersecurity the fairy tale? What's the story you find yourself telling most often to executives who don't speak fluent tech? Is it Little Red Riding Hood wandering through the dark woods, or the three little pigs trying to build houses strong enough to withstand the big bad wolf of ransomware?
Yeah, so honestly, the one that I go to, and I've been using it for 20 years, is the old Indian parable about the blind man and the elephant. And for those of you out there that are unfamiliar with the story, I'll kind of summarize it. So, for whatever reason, because there's never really a good reason for these stories, some folks decided to bring an elephant into the village square, and they brought in seven blind men and placed them at different places on the elephant. And of course, they all saw something different, right? The blind man who was by the trunk said an elephant is like a serpent. And the one by the leg said it's like a tree. And the one by the tail says it's a rope. And the tusk is a spear. And the abdomen is a wall. And what's interesting about that, all of those perspectives are true if that is the only perspective that you have. But we need to do better. We need to step away from the problem. We need to start thinking about, I know how I see this, but how does Keelin see it? How does Bob see it? How does Mary see
Yeah.
it? Because the only way we can be successful is by bringing this bigger perspective. And what's interesting about that parable is I told it in a workshop with a friend of mine many, many years ago without even thinking about it, just off the cuff. And it really resonated with the group. She had six teams that worked for her, and they were all really good, but they didn't talk to each other.
Mm.
And that parable enabled them to take a step back. And she said, literally in less than 90 days, she stopped getting phone calls. Well, they told me they can't do this, or they said we should do this. She said all that stuff went away. And instead of coming to her as a manager, they went to each other and said, hey, we're thinking about this. What do you guys think? And to
Yeah.
me, that's a go-to story that applies pretty much in every single organization I talk to.
Yeah, I love that. So what I'm hearing is, more collaboration, more breaking down silos and allowing for other people's perspectives, even if they're in a non-tech department, maybe, or,
Yeah, I
technical
think
realm.
especially if they're in a non-tech department because they are our customers.
Yep,
So,
100%.
we need to, I tell people all the time, if you keep going to the movies and you keep dragging your partner, your significant other to a Marvel movie, but they want to go see a romantic comedy, they're going to stop going to the movies with you and they may not even tell you why.
Right.
So, got to bring them in, got to engage them.
So we have to have human conversations, really, and continue to use our humanity in order to solve these problems. I love that. I love that. Thank you. Okay, moving on. You built a career on helping executives withstand complex risk at Gardner and now at Black Kite. What's the secret sauce? How do you take a technical monster, say third party cyber risk, and turn it into a story that makes sense to someone who's thinking about budgets, supply chains, ROI, or even stockholders?
So, I'm going to start off with a secret. It shouldn't be a
Ooh, I
secret,
love
but it is.
secrets.
All of our executives care about three things: money coming in, money going out, and if something goes bad, who gets in trouble. That's it. Now, that is a dramatic oversimplification, and there's a lot that goes into that. You can talk about money coming in. Well, is that getting new customers, keeping our customers, buying vendors, whatever it may be? But ultimately, those are the things we need to start off with and work backwards from there. This risk I'm going to tell you about, here's the potential impact it's going to have. We won't be able to send bills out. We won't be able to ship product. Maybe we won't be able to provide customer support, or maybe our website will be down, or talking about extending it into partners, maybe our order fulfillment system, our order management system is down. Maybe our shipping company got hit with ransomware. There are a lot of stories about those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And we need to work backwards from those three sort of secret, that shouldn't be secret, objectives. And then you get away from, well, why should I care? Right. Like I,
Right.
I think when you and I chatted last week, I may have mentioned this, but I'll share it with the audience. I have a friend of mine. He's a CEO. He just sold his company for $750 million. Brilliant guy. Love him. Amazing. I got him on the phone. I said, so cybersecurity, why do you care? And he thought for a second. He said, well, I'm worried about ransomware. Why? Well, ransomware is bad. Why? Why do you care? He didn't have an answer. And this is a guy who's way smarter than me. He built a company, he sold a company, he's doing all kinds of cool stuff. But even he didn't really understand. And that's not his fault. That's
Right.
the technology people's fault, because they haven't communicated the fact, hey, you're hearing about ransomware. Here are the three things that will happen when we get hit. Not
The
if, when we
impact.
get hit, right?
Hmm.
Our data is going to be out there and we're going to get sued. Our data is going to be inaccessible and we're not going to have systems up and running. And maybe they're going to report us to the government, which we saw a couple of times when the SEC put their ruling in place. But it's that whole thing, working backwards from the end. No storyteller throughout history started a story without knowing how the ending was going to be. Right? You always start with
Right.
the end. How do we want to end? What's the message? What's the lesson? What is it we want to get across? And then we can work backwards from there. And I'll tell you, Keelan, and I shared this. I actually did a presentation at the SAN Security Awareness Conference last week in Chicago. Um, and I shared with the audience that I tell stories. I don't even know if they're true anymore, because I've been telling them for such a long time. I've internalized them, but it doesn't actually matter if it's true. If it's
Right.
reasonable and helps you make a point and gets a discussion going, I think that's a big win right there.
Yeah, I think that framing it into parables and fables are just fine. It's just 21st century, right? Like we have an
Yep.
update of these monsters and dragons. And going back to your CEO friend, um, I think that's good learning, even on my part, is that I will talk to people about the threats of ransomware and I will scare the crap out of them. And it's like, I don't want to walk away from a conversation scaring you so badly that you're, not going to be able to do your work. However, it is a real threat out there, just like you said, not if, but when. And understanding the real cost of it is so important. And I've talked about this a little bit in other episodes, is like we'll look at the ROI or the loss of funds, but you're also looking at people's human health. You don't know like what
Right.
that stress is, when people go home, like it is a ripple effect.
Yeah, and you mentioned that, and I'm going to share something with your audience that I don't share all the time. It's not that I deliberately don't do it, but there's a drinking problem in our industry. There are people that are self-medicating themselves.
I have
I
chills. I'm
have
so
not
glad you're
had
talking about
that.
this.
I have not had a drink in 13 years, largely because drinking turned me into someone I didn't like. It also
Hmm.
turned me into somebody my wife didn't like, which is really is a bigger problem. But
Yeah.
I'm seeing more and more people who are kind of going, hey, like there's so much stress in this. Why am I doing this to myself? And I think, other than a lot of people sort of stopping drinking, there's a great group, and I'll share the information. You can share with your listeners, called
Right.
Sober and Cyber, which is basically all about setting up non-alcoholic events at conferences, right?
Awesome.
Everything's around booze. Everything's around getting liquored up. And, been there, done that, got the t-shirt. Um, but I think that we need to figure out a way to not put our colleagues in these super stressful situations because it's lose lose for them. And I don't know if you're seeing the same thing, Keelan, that I am. A lot of my CISO friends, they don't want those jobs anymore.
No, I
They don't want the
agree.
stress. They don't want the
Yeah.
stress.
People are running to the mountains. And I'm so glad you brought up the drinking thing because I have been retired, is how I say it, from drinking and smoking for 8 years. And I actually, in my story, is I ran away from my corporate job, which was high stress. I worked in an emergency notification software company. I quit drinking, I quit smoking. I was like, I got to get out of here. And my mom actually ended up passing away on my 60th day of sobriety. So with
Yeah.
that, it
Sorry to hear
sort of,
that.
yeah, I mean, it sucked, but at the same time, it really like solidified my path of being sober. But I will say that and I've talked about this in other circles in cyber, it is all around drinking. And why are we self-medicating? We could get into a whole, philosophical conversation, but I'm so glad you put that up because, I quit drinking also because I did not like who I was becoming. I'd seen it really destroy a lot of people in my family. But there's also a little bit of me that I'm like, a little bit annoyed sometimes that like those guys can drink and still have great careers and have it together, like that like little cynical part of me. And then I just remember like no, I've actually broken through something here that is very important, and you and I get to be the symbols of that because the stress starts to go away,
Yep.
clarity comes, and my husband and I spend a lot of time in Idaho. I love being up there, not around so many people running to the mountains, but I also love being in Southern California around lots of people, and being around
Right.
the drinking doesn't bother me necessarily, but I do see a systematic problem within the industry, within a lot of our industries, because we obviously work with end users and all different kinds of
Yep.
industries. So I'm glad that you brought that up because in order for us to be human and to make tech human again, I don't think we need to self medicate as much as we are. And I think there are creative technological answers to help us get through it.
Yeah, I definitely agree, it's like a verboten topic. People don't want to talk about it, but all you have to do is look at these events where let's have a party at a bar. Let's go do this. Let's host a whiskey tasting or a wine tasting or whatever. And you're
Yeah.
alienating and sort of marginalizing a whole bunch of people. And I'll tell you, and I won't call any names out, but someone that I don't even know posted something on LinkedIn about 3 weeks ago, basically saying, like, why are all these events around getting drunk? And a whole bunch of people with pretty impressive titles shut this person down. Well, just because
Wow.
you can't drink doesn't mean we should be able to drink. And I jumped in and I told a story about something. I managed a team earlier in my career, and I had a young lady that worked for me, and she felt bullied into doing something after hours that she didn't really want to do.
Mm.
As a result of that, she stopped coming to corporate functions. And when the time, and I'm embarrassed to say this, but I've learned the lesson. When the time came for reviews, you know what the general consensus was? She's not a team player.
Not a team player. Wow.
She didn't get the promotion that she should have had because we bullied her into going someplace she didn't want to go. And it
Hmm.
wasn't it wasn't on purpose. Oh, come on, it'll be fun.
Right.
Just come for one, right? And that's the thing, and that's why when you and I chatted last week, it just your sort of whole take just really resonated with me. And I know I made an intro to a good friend of mine who
Mhm.
also comes at it from that side. And I just think that we're people, our customers are people, the attackers are people, not necessarily people we want to hang out with, but if you understand people, it's much easier to deal with them. If you understand people, it is much easier to engage. It is much easier to ask someone for help when things are bad if you already have that relationship, as opposed to every time you call me, something's blowing up. You stop doing that.
Right.
And I think we need
Yeah.
to move away from that. And I'll be honest with you, Keelan, I don't really have a lot of the answers. I know what the answers are for me. And
Right.
I do a lot of mentoring, and I consider myself an ally. But I was at an event in Chicago last week, and I spoke, it was a security awareness event, which tends to be much more gender balanced than traditional cyber roles for whatever reason. And it's actually something I probably want to start asking some questions why that might be. And
Mhm.
a lot of the conversation was, people talking about, I walk into these rooms, I don't feel like I belong there. I
Mm.
don't feel like I'm qualified. There's a lot of imposter
Imposter
syndrome,
syndrome.
and it's everywhere. I just hear about it a lot from our colleagues, and as I certainly won't um, pretend to know what women in tech go through and what women in cyber go through, but there's got to be a reason why they're leaving the industry in droves, right?
Yeah, I mean, I left
And
and I went and opened up a coaching company because it was, but I missed it and I came back. And I also realized my
yeah,
impact that I can have in the industry. So sorry to interrupt you, but I
no, 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 that
completely
is huge. There was this old thing, act locally, think globally, and
I
I
love
think
it.
we
Yep.
we need to do that, right? How
Yeah,
do I like? I always tell people my objective every day, very simply, is I want to leave the world at least a little
a little bit
better than I
better.
found it when I got up. And I
100%.
frequently fail at achieving that objective, but you know what the beauty is? I get to start again tomorrow, every day.
Yeah.
And, that's something that my recovery taught me, right? Is that I get to restart sometimes in the middle of the day. I am not being the me that I want to be. I'm going to restart, and I'm going to think about what other people think. And this is something my wife gives me a hard time about, because my wife, um, she'll have a conflict with somebody or something. And I go, my response is, well, have you thought about the other person's perspective? She said, I don't want to hear about the
Hmm.
other person's perspective. But until we understand other people's perspectives, it's very
Yeah,
hard for us and we can't always give them what they want, but at least if we understand people's motivations, we can at least maybe get closer together. And we
and
just
it,
need more collaboration just across the board.
definitely. So a couple points on that. You said a lot, and I don't want to forget. One point is when I retired from my corporate job, I went internally. I mean, my mom passed away, which was very traumatic for me. It was very sudden. It was unexpected. I was 37. I felt too young. And I went internally and started working on myself, like big time. And I do that every day. I really got to work on it, and I call it, leadership training and going through a lot of I wouldn't say self-help, but self-support programs and things like
Mhm.
that. And I think that allowed me to, it's not really building armor, but having myself grounded enough that I could come back into an industry that can be toxic sometimes, can be overly masculine, can be, shut you down. And I think when I've come back, I've actually been very much welcomed into this industry, and it's been amazing. And then the other point, oh my gosh, what was it? You were talking about, what were you just talking about? I should
Oh,
have written it
don't do
down.
that. I can't. I don't. I've been doing this so long. I don't have preprocessors anymore. It literally goes brain out the mouth,
Oh,
and I
I know
can
what it
never
was.
repeat what I was talking about.
Don't worry, audience. I got it. So it was perspective. So one thing I've thought a lot about are the threat actors. Is is how it is not illegal for China and Russia and used to be the Ukraine hacking us, stealing our data. And I think that perspective, that's something that I love playing with. I really um, love thinking about, well, how do they see us? How are we thinking locally, but also being a global society? Whether we like it or not, we all live on the same rock, right? So we've got a lot of different cultural differences, and what is it that it's not just money, right? But money is getting them something. And that perspective piece, I think, is so important to this overall conversation about this season on Cyber Soul is talking about, the threat actors are driving innovation. We're throwing kind of band-aids at all of this. And how do we become human enough to not only get ahead of it, but how can we work together and use our creativity globally to create something awesome?
Yeah, and it's interesting you talk about understanding the attackers. I used to mess with the scammers when they would call. And then I read an article maybe 6 or 9 months ago. It was either like a New Yorker magazine or New York Times Sunday, but a lot of these people are actually essentially they're slaves. They get brought into countries that don't
Hmm.
have extradition. They get put up in these apartments. They take their passports, and the real bad actors, the ones that we want to bring down, they basically say, if you don't make these phone calls, we're going to kill your family.
Yeah. So it's like
So
it's like old school kidnapping, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
they're essentially they're in white collar slavery, and I it's just.
And it
I
happens
mean,
here in the States because I was watching, I
oh
don't know if it
yeah.
was like a catfishing or something, and it was such a mastermind of like this person was being held, ransom for this person, so they had to make the phone call, and it was here in the States, and it wasn't out of a Hollywood movie. It was actually really happening.
Oh yeah. My wife actually knows someone who through her business who at 30 years old got kidnapped out of a bar in Boston and was essentially trafficked
Oh
for
my God.
3 years and she finally escaped. But it was like, well, what do you mean you got kidnapped out of a bar in Boston? She doesn't even know. Somebody probably just slipped something in her drink and walked her right out the door, and it's not a nice thing to talk about, but there are bad people out there, and
There
and you know
really
what?
are.
Those bad people want to steal from us. They want to steal from my parents. They want to steal from your parents. They want to take advantage, and this is where I had this epiphany on stage last year, which I often sort of have these ideas when I'm just kind of riffing, where we're at war and we're losing. And in part, we're losing because the bad actors, they're collaborating. They're talking about who they're getting. They're talking about how they're getting them. We don't collaborate. We don't collaborate with people in
Right.
our own companies. We don't
Yep.
collaborate with other people in our industry. We don't collaborate across industries. And all you vendors out there, you're all guilty of this too. There's plenty of stuff that I could talk to my competitors, peers at my competitors about that we can make the world better and safer without undermining our business because that's what we do. And they don't want to have those conversations,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
There's just everybody's at each other's throats for a
For
nickel
the
here
next
and a nickel
buck.
there.
But
Yep.
pretty
And as
soon,
a result,
if everyone keeps getting hacked and attacked and all of our data is out there, I mean, we're faced with some big problems coming up, and I don't think we're going to solve them today. But I have a question because we should wrap up in a couple minutes.
yeah, 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 of course.
If you had to leave our listeners with one fairy tale moral about cybersecurity, what would it be? Is it don't take candy from strangers, don't go into the woods alone, or a bar in Boston alone, or maybe make sure your house is built with bricks, not straw? What's the one
Yeah.
takeaway?
I think the boy or girl who cried wolf, I think, is a great story because that is the reputation that
Hmm.
security people have, right? That
Right.
every single new thing that comes out is the end of the world. And that's just not real. And I always sort of use that as a metaphor. So when you're going to your executives, you can tell them that story and say, listen, there's a bunch of stuff we could come in and scare you with. But we're not going to do that. We already got a lot of that handled. And by the way, most of it's just not that important. But rest assured, when we come and talk to you about two or three or four things, those are the things you need to pay attention to because we've already filtered down the background noise. And I think that's
Yeah.
sort of one key takeaway from another story.
That's awesome. Thank you. Well, Jeffrey, I really appreciate you being here and reminding us that even in cybersecurity, a good story goes a long way. You're a wonderful storyteller. I'm really glad that we got to dive into sobriety and different ways of thinking, because that's what really my intention is with this podcast, especially this season, is how do we get ahead of the threat actors? And the same answer keeps coming back is that we get to be human together. We really get to be in cahoots together. So if people want to find you and connect with you, how can they do that? And we can put some links in the show notes too.
Yeah, no, that would be great. So the best way is really LinkedIn. I'm like very active on LinkedIn. I post, I'm a big fan. I see pictures and they make me think of things. So I do a lot of that stuff.
Me
We
too.
also, we're launching a brand. Yeah, I love doing that. My wife laughs. She's like, I
Visual.
don't know where you come up with this stuff. The other thing, we're actually launching a brand new podcast. We're actually going to be recording the first week of September called Third Party. So it is me, our
Cool.
chief security officer, and our head of research. And it's going to be really, really fun and cool. So definitely keep
Awesome.
your eyes out for that. And I do a lot of blogging on our website. But the other thing too is I do a lot of events. Um, if anyone, oh, this won't go up, but I'm in New York at SACA GRC this week. So, if you see me in the hallway, stop me, talk to me. I love talking to people. I love talking to people about what they're working on, and I love helping people. And I this career has given me a life beyond my wildest dreams, and I want to share that with everybody.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. And what was the link for the sober cyber community?
Oh, it is called Sober in Cyber, and I will get you the link.
Cool.
Yeah, actually, and I had the opportunity at Black Hat to meet with Jen V, who runs it. I believe it, I don't know her last name. But I'll
Was her
send you the
name
link.
Gen
It's super
Z?
cool. V is in
Oh,
victory, but that's not her last name.
got
Yeah.
it.
You go to
Cool.
Black Hat, people don't use their real names. So if you, and by the way, if you see me at Black Hat or DEF CON, I don't go by Jeffrey, I go by Monkey. So if you
Okay.
hear people call me Monkey, they're not insulting me. That's actually
That's your
my hacker
handle.
handle.
Awesome.
There's a background story that you and I'll share over non-alcoholic cocktails one day.
I really look forward to that. And for now, thank you again for joining us. And for everyone listening, thank you so much for being here, being on the journey. If this resonated with you, landed with you, please share, please comment below, and tune in next time. And again, Jeffrey, thanks for your work, the work you do in the world. You're awesome. Thanks for all your
Oh,
awesome
my
stories.
pleasure, Keelin. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Bye for now.